Okay, I'm in now. I see the slides. It's showing up that I'm connected, right?
Yes, Tora.
Okay.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to this year's Campaign Connect webinar, a data-informed, relationship-driven approach to transforming school, culture, and climate. We are glad that you're able to join us today. I'm looking forward to having some good conversation with our guest panelists. Just to introduce myself, my name is Christina Knight, and I am a project manager for the Center for Supportive Schools working out of the New Jersey office. And I am also the technical assistance provider for our whole school climate and culture initiative called Campaign Connect. Now, before we jump in, just a few quick things. If you're not speaking, if you could remain on mute, we'd appreciate it. And now I'm going to turn it over to our guests so that they can introduce themselves with just a side note that one of our guests, Carla Royster, is having some technical difficulties, but will be joining us in just a minute. So Kyle, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kyle Schimpf. I'm the assistant principal at Community Middle School in the West Windsor-Plainsboro School District. I've been a part of Campaign Connect not only as a teacher, but now as an administrator here at Community Middle School, where we have completed our first cycle and are looking forward to doing the work that you'll see coming up soon and continuing that work with our climate and culture.
Thank you, Kyle. And Tora?
Hi, I'm Tora Ostaszewski. I'm a teacher at Walter C. Black Elementary School in East Windsor. I'm currently going through the cycle with the elementary school, but prior to that, I participated in Campaign Connect as a stakeholder for several years, and my previous school has gone through the complete cycle, and they're actually going through the process again.
Great. So welcome, Kyle and Tora. We're extremely grateful that you're able to join us today. and for the hard work and support that you have been offering your schools in your facilitative roles. Once Carla joins us, we'll give her an opportunity to introduce herself as well, but until then, we'll move on. So before we jump into specifically Campaign Connect and this idea of a data-based and relationship-driven approach, I'm just going to give you an overview of the Center for Supportive Schools. The Center for Supportive Schools began in 1979, and we partner with schools to help create safe, supportive, engaging, and inspiring environments. You'll hear those buzzwords often, and that's truly what we need for students and faculty to be engaged. We've served hundreds of schools since our 79 start. Our work has touched tens of thousands of students, educators, parents, and also the surrounding communities annually. And we're committed to implementing programs with high fidelity, especially in communities that have large numbers of economically disadvantaged youth, but not exclusively in those communities. Other programs that you'll hear coming out of Center for Supportive Schools include Peer Group Connection, also known as PGC, Team PEP, Achievement Mentoring, and the program that we'll be exploring today, Campaign Connect. So I see that Carla has joined us, and so I'd like to give her the chance just to introduce herself to the group. Carla, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, group. My name is Dr. Carla Royster. I'm from West Windsor Plainsboro Regional High School South. I'm assistant principal there. I have been with Campaign Connect, I believe, since the second year because I started when I was the assistant principal at the middle school here in this district, and then when I was promoted to the high school, I ended up continuing the work. So that's basically all there is to know. No, it's not, but it's enough for now.
So thank you, Carla, and also thank you, Cora and Kyle, for joining us as our special guests today. Mm-hmm. So the challenge that we'll be focusing on today is how do you foster the type of equal voice dialogue needed to create meaningful school change? And so we're starting with an underlying assumption that dialogue within a stakeholder team and within a school building needs to be equitable in order to create positive and meaningful and long-lasting school change. So some of the objectives that we'll be exploring in today's webinar include learning how this collaborative and equitable dialogue among diverse stakeholders, and we'll talk more about what that means later, fosters the relationship building necessary for lasting school change. So that's that relationship building piece. We'll explore how data analysis through this same framework of equitable dialogue creates a foundation for sustainable action planning. So as we have these relationships and are analyzing data through the lens of relationship building, we can create a sustainable action plan. We'll learn how these approaches are embedded within this program, Campaign Connect, which is New Jersey initiative that supports whole schools in connecting climate and culture with student achievement. And we'll talk to Kyle, Cora, and Carla, our Campaign Connect special guests and participants, to learn about their experiences implementing protocols, promoting equitable dialogue, and what this relationship-driven database approach has looked like for them in their school communities. And then finally, all of the participants in our webinar will gain access to free protocol resources that will support school climate and culture, which you'll receive in an email once this webinar is complete. So more specifically about Campaign Connect. Campaign Connect is developed with the support of the New Jersey Advisory Board, and it provides step-by-step guides to support climate and culture improvement. You heard Tora use the language of we went through the cycle. And so this step-by-step guide is through a framework of a 6-step cycle that we'll explore in our next slide. We also provide forums for dialogue and resource sharing, including out-of-school training for facilitators, administrators, and the entire stakeholder team at the end of the year summit event, and a certification system for schools and districts. And so once schools have completed the 6-step cycle, they can apply for certification and show the impact that they've made in both qualitative and quantitative ways through the use of Campaign Connect in their building, and they are eligible to be certified. And just last year, we had 5 schools certified at our summit event. So the Campaign Connect certification 6-step cycle might look familiar to you. It's a cycle framework that you may see in other climate and culture initiatives with a few nuances unique to Campaign Connect. And so you start just by registering, by onboarding, by expressing interest in signing up. And step 2 is establishing or reestablishing a diverse stakeholder team. And we'll explore that a little bit more in depth because that's a really key step in promoting that relationship building component of Campaign Connect. Step 3 is the step that you'll hear facilitators say is maybe the heaviest lift in some ways. It's the collecting and analyzing data piece. And when we say data, we mean 3 layers of data: baseline data, which might be attendance, discipline referrals, grade promotion; climate and culture survey data from faculty, students, and parents; and then finally qualitative data through the use of focus groups across those same subgroups. Once the data has been analyzed and collected by the stakeholder team, you'll be ready to create a climate and culture strategy, which lists out your priorities and the actions that you want to take, and then create an action plan of either pre-existing or new programs, concepts, actions that you want to introduce into your school community in order to address the underlying issues and root causes that surface during your data analysis. Step 5 entails actually implementing your action plan and measuring and tracking the progress that you make. And then finally, step 6 is applying for certification and or the badges that we provide to certified schools. And then once you have completed step 6, the game isn't over. Climate and culture change is sort of this never-ending spiral, and so schools then go back and they reestablish a new or revised stakeholder team. They collect and look at new data, and then they revise their action plan based on any new things that developed during steps 2 and 3. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk a little bit about this establishing a stakeholder team piece and the importance of having a diverse stakeholder team. So when you're thinking of creating a diverse school-based team, in the framework of Campaign Connect, you'll have 2 trained facilitators ideally. And in Campaign Connect, these facilitators are trained by Center for Supportive Schools in both a summer training for new facilitators and also a 1-day training in the fall that we provide out of the school building. It's important that there are 2 trained facilitators because the same way we want to model equitable dialogue in the full stakeholder team where everyone has a voice, we want to model equitable dialogue between facilitators where they share equal pieces in moving this work along and introducing meeting outlines. We'll also have administrators on our stakeholder team. Principals, assistant principals have sat on the team, but it's important to note that they're not usually the lead of the team. Principals especially usually play a supportive role. The team can ask questions. They have their voice as a participant, but because of the dynamics, we often encourage principals to not take that lead facilitative role. We also include faculty on the stakeholder team meeting from various departments ranging from science to the arts, other staff members that might be critical to revealing sides of the school community that may be overlooked. So perhaps the cafeteria workers, the custodians, the security guards, anyone that students really connect with or who interact with students on a regular basis that may have a perspective that's overlooked just by the teachers and the administrators. We also include parents and representatives from any community-based organizations that work closely with students. That could be a park ranger, it could be someone from a faith-based organization, and whatever feels appropriate or relevant for your school community. And then last but certainly not least, we include students. And so when we're thinking of anything ranging from elementary school through a high school, we're thinking of representatives from different grade levels. We're thinking of students that aren't just the A students, they're not just the model students, but maybe some of the students who would otherwise slip through the cracks if they weren't involved in this team. Students that represent different parts of the student body so that that equitable voice piece continues to be surfaced as a priority, where we're hearing not just from the students that you would perhaps normally hear from in other clubs or other activities, but students that have an idea of what's really going on in all corners of the building. And so this diverse stakeholder team is crucial for this relationship building piece, because if you want to make whole school climate and culture change, the whole school has to be represented and has to have buy-in. The New York Times published an article not too long ago entitled "What Google Learned from Its Quest to Build the Perfect Team." This link will be sent out to all of our participants at the end of the webinar, but I'll just read two quick excerpts that you'll see on the slide. The researchers eventually concluded that what distinguished the good teams from the dysfunctional groups was how teammates treated one another. The right norms, in other words, could raise a group's collective intelligence, whereas the wrong norms could hobble a team, even if individually all the members were exceptionally bright. And on the good teams, members spoke in roughly the same proportion, a phenomenon the research referred to as equality and distribution of conversational turn-taking. And so essentially what Google learned in the study of what makes a good team is that it doesn't necessarily have to be the group of, for our purposes, straight A students. It doesn't necessarily have to be the members who are exceptionally bright. Rather, what's important is that everyone has the opportunity to have equal voice, and that the correct norms in facilitating the teams are enforced, and that the group has buy-in to those norms. And so as we move forward in this webinar, we're going to explore how this combination of looking at data, having a diverse stakeholder team, and using protocols to create equitable dialogue is sort of the perfect trifecta for having a good team in your culture and climate initiative. So we're going to pause and have a word from our guest panelists. How has Campaign Connect empowered student voice within your school? And what's been the value of hearing diverse voices give input about your school's culture and climate? So whoever wants to jump in first, feel free.
I'm good with getting started. When I worked at the middle school and I was chosen to be a part of the stakeholder team for Campaign Connect, the facilitators talked about the importance of having a diverse population of students. And so just sort of to prep us with the idea that they may not be students that we normally expect, but we did have the student council president on the stakeholder team, but we also had students that were typically the students that were a little more disengaged in school. Maybe they had a lot of school absences. They didn't participate in clubs or activities. Maybe they had some discipline referrals. And what the facilitators on the team realized is that if we are going to have an impact on our school culture and climate, we need to make sure that we're reaching those students that we really want to bring into the school, to get them engaged, to get them to be part of the community. So we need to hear their voices. So we definitely, I think it's surprising for some people sometimes because they look at Campaign Connect as a privilege to participate in, but just because you aren't necessarily the most engaged in school, your voice is still important to get to the root cause of that problem. So we definitely had a lot of success. Those students who you typically don't hear from at school really want to share why you're not hearing from them, why they're disengaged, why they don't come to school, when you sort of have a forum where it's open and you have people who are willing to listen to their voices.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, thank you. I think I can jump in here from the middle school perspective as well. We have 1,200 students here at Community Middle School, and it's an opportunity. Campaign Connect is, whether it be through surveys or focus groups, I feel like over the course of the last really 4 or 5 years, we have come up with avenues where we ask the customer, quote unquote, how is your experience? How are you finding your classes? How are you finding extracurricular activities? Are you able to connect? Are you able to engage here at CMS? And to be able to get that student voice as a result of these different tools, and even more so over the course of years, that has kind of broken down walls that have kind of maybe were put up or were at least there in the minds of folks that you couldn't approach approach a teacher or an adult in the class to ask a question, or you couldn't approach an administrator with a concern or with an idea that you would like to kind of take on for the school. We've broken down those types of barriers, and it's been really the work we've done with Campaign Connect has allowed that to happen. And there is a diversity there when you're kind of open door and open communication policy. You hear from everybody from all different parts of the school, and so really it's been an excellent opportunity for us to hear from the source, from the students who are experiencing our programming and our school building day in and day out. We now get to understand better what those experiences are like, so that we can, and I love that idea of drilling down to those root causes, we can really come up with, where are there areas for growth, and then target them through the Campaign Connect process as well.
Thank you, Kyle.
And just to add to that, I just wanted to say that I believe that one of the positives is that it moved us kind of out of the delusion of our assumed culture and climate, because we have an assumption of what is really going on in our buildings, and it looks very different through the eyes of the students. So we were able to get to some of the true issues that ended up being revealed by the data, which was shaped and driven by the students that were a part of our group. So it's very helpful.
Thank you, Carla. So I'm hearing a lot of really meaningful things. One, that allowing students across different corners of the school building, representing different demographics and even different quote-unquote achievement levels, allowed a lot of those communication barriers to be broken down, to be able to get the feedback that administrators and teachers need in order to create a climate and culture that is engaging for all students, not just some. And I also, Carla, I really liked your phrase that it revealed the delusion of what you believed the climate and culture to be, which was different than your preconceived ideas once the students started speaking up. And so it sort of peels back that veil that administrators and even teachers may have about the culture and climate, and shows what students may be feeling and thinking and experiencing, so that everyone is bought into the initiatives that are brought into the building. So thank you to our guests for their insight. We've heard the phrase or the word protocols used a few times so far in this webinar. And just as context, when we say protocols, we mean a structured approach to equitable dialogue. So in various steps of Campaign Connect, as you're analyzing data, as you're coming up with the root causes of the issues that surface, and as you're creating your action plan, the entire stakeholder team will go through these protocols so that everyone has an equal voice in a structured and timed manner, facilitated by the CFS trained facilitators as they go through the meeting. And so here is a quote excerpted from The Power of Protocol. What if people stopped to listen to other people's takes on the important problems at hand? What if problems were unpeeled layer by layer? What if everyone's voice were heard, everyone's perspectives valued? What if lots of people were as skilled in facilitating genuine conversation as so many now are at avoiding it, suppressing it, or smothering it with self-centered talk? Protocols structure conversations so that everyone gets time to speak and everybody gets time to listen, so that presenting, examining, questioning, and responding are kept in balance, and so that meetings are optimally honest and respectful. And so we can think of meetings that we've been in where a few people may dominate the conversation, other people may remain on the sidelines, and you're wondering, what does everyone think? What would it look like if everyone in this group were able to be honest, felt respected, and spent an equal amount of time listening and speaking? And so that's what protocols seek to do. And protocols, again, are embedded in every step of Campaign Connect, so that everyone from the third or fourth grade student on your team through the assistant principal or principal receives the exact same amount of time to speak and add their input to the issues being discussed at hand. So another question for our guests: what has it been like for your stakeholder team to use protocols when analyzing data? and how have Campaign Connect's protocols impacted the way people communicate with each other in your school community?
I'd like to take this one first.
Great.
Because when I started with Campaign Connect, you would have never have received the introduction that I gave today. That I had difficulty just kind of staying on the point and knowing that that my voice needed to be heard, but so did others, and that the protocols strive to kind of set the stage for conversations that are more data-driven, more truth-driven. It kind of spreads the opportunities for dialogue throughout the group, and many of the teachers specifically in our group had difficulty and administrators abiding by the protocol, but they assist in kind of leveling out the dominant and the meek so that everybody kind of learns to talk and everyone also learns to listen.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll hop in there too. I think the protocols were especially important when we got to the step of analyzing data. I mean, as you mentioned, Christina, at the beginning, you're looking at quantitative data, qualitative data, focus groups, surveys, baseline data. There's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of stuff that you can sift through, and as you said, that part of the cycle is really one of the biggest lifts. And I feel like if it weren't for protocols that are specifically designed to, as Carla said, allow all voices an opportunity, really also allow everybody to listen and to hear a variety of perspectives, and kept us on time and on target, and really forced us to think purposefully and intentionally around what we were seeing, we could be in that group. We could be at that step for years without those protocols. And I think that for the three of us that are here, and for those of us who have experienced this, it's interesting how then we've been able to pull protocols into the building in different ways. It has really allowed us to kind of, whether it be in a faculty meeting or a PTSA meeting, to do a protocol that allows different people to communicate with one another all throughout the school community. So it's, on that micro focus, it certainly helped us get through the dense data that we were looking at so that we can start creating action steps and move forward as a team. But more so, these are tools that are universal. These are tools that you can use regardless of what team you're working in or what school you're working in, and in what capacity. And it really just helps create efficiencies, create redundancies, allows people to talk, and really forces people to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Kyle.
I think with just my experience at the elementary school level now, the protocols have been especially important to get students engaged in the conversations. It can be really intimidating to have 4th and 5th graders sitting in a room at a big table with their principal and their guidance counselor and some of their teachers and parents. It can be intimidating to get those students to share their opinions and their voices. I think middle schoolers were a little more comfortable jumping right in, but in elementary school they're definitely younger, and in class they're used to the structure of being called on and having the expectations of when they're allowed to speak, and giving them the protocol where they see that the principal is following the same protocol as a 4th grader, that their voice has to be heard just as much as their principal, I think has been really empowering for a lot of those students. And towards the beginning of the process, bringing it here to the elementary school, it was a little challenging to get them to jump in and share, but now that they're so used to that's the process of the protocol, they know that they're going to have a chance, and we want to hear what their opinion is. So we definitely have seen the different types of protocols sort of seep into other areas of the school when we're running different meetings or clubs or activities. It just helps getting us on track, keeping us on that path so we don't get derailed, and making sure we get to the end goal.
Yeah, thank you. And something that I've heard pretty much from every Campaign Connect school that I've worked in is that when facilitators are first starting to use protocols, there's this frustration. It's so hard to stay on task stay in the protocol, to see the value of this very structured way of speaking and listening and taking turns. And then by the end of the process, or as they're going through the process, it clicks that this is really making a difference. It's building relationships among the team. It's spreading into other parts of the school community. And as one stakeholder team member said at our summit 2 years ago, protocols were really difficult for someone like her because she was used to speaking often and to expressing her opinions in the moment. And then she realized that everything ultimately was boiling down to love, that you create this positive culture and climate within your stakeholder team through the use of protocols, and that's the impetus for creating a positive climate and culture and good relationships in the rest of the building. So thank you to our guests for sharing their experiences in using protocols and how they've impacted the school community. So without further ado, we're going to look at what a protocol actually looks like. Again, this is a free protocol resource that all of our participants will receive via email at the end of the webinar, and this protocol is our main data analysis protocol in step 3. It's one of the first protocols that stakeholder teams use in the 6-step cycle, and it's a means to get through that difficult task of exploring baseline data and climate and culture survey data. So there are multiple layers to this protocol. Everyone first starts with a starting lens. That might sound like the whole group going in a circle and saying something along the lines of, before I even look at this data, I assume, I predict, my expectations are influenced by. And so again, it's acknowledging that everyone coming to the table has their own biases and that they have an expectation of what the data is going to say before they even look at it. And they might, they'll go in order, they'll share this starting lens so that everyone will have an opportunity to hear of what biases and preconceived ideas and assumptions everyone's bringing to the table. Next, there are context and clarifying questions. It's hard. This step is a little bit tricky because people want to jump into probing questions. But once teams take an initial glance at the data, they may have clarifying questions such as, when was this data collected? What was the timeline? Or can you remind me how many students were surveyed? How many of them took this survey? That's what a clarifying question would be versus something that's more probing and requires more of an in-depth explanation. The next layer of the data analysis protocol involves factual observations, and these observations will be flip charted by a scribe or by one of the facilitators, and it will literally just be the facts. A pattern I see is that 10% of 8th graders are absent in this particular month of the year. Over half of the students say that they strongly agree that they have a strong bond with an adult in the building. And so it's not any inferences, there's no why or because, it's really just the facts, something that you can see in a straightforward manner that everyone around the table would agree with. And again, you'll go around one at a time and everyone will share just one observation. And you can continue going in a circle until it's been exhausted, but it's important that everyone has that equal voice and that you're sharing one at a time with a certain time limit facilitated by the CSS-trained staff. Next, you'll move into inferences. Everyone's always itching to get to this part because the second you see data, you can't help but have your brain jump in a million directions as to why the data says what it says. And so this, again, would be scribed by someone on the team. And it might sound like, I believe the data suggests, because some good news in the data is that over half of the students believe that they have a strong bond with an adult in the building. And I think it's good news because we know that at least half of our students are being engaged by our faculty. It could also sound like a challenge that the data is revealing is that it seems like this particular demographic of students are less engaged than others. And I think it's a challenge because we need to know how to reach those kids. And so there's that inference level. And again, you'll go one at a time. You'll share inferences in a circle around the table. and someone will be scribing it so that everyone can see the big picture as it's being written down on flip chart paper or on the board or whatever is at your disposal. From there, the team will pause, and there will be what we call a reality check with the school leader. And so ideally, there's going to be an administrator on the team, the principal and assistant principal. And based on the observations and the inferences, the facilitators will ask this administrator, how do the group's observations thus far overlap with how the school leadership understands this data? So from your perspective, what do you think about what we've come up with so far? How does the administration view this data, and is it similar or different, and in what ways, to the inferences and the observations that we made? And then also, the administrator will have the opportunity to give additional information that might be relevant. So perhaps, wow, it really looks like there are so many discipline referrals this month. I wonder why that is. The principal might be able to say, well, it's important to realize that it's the same 1, 2, 3 kids coming in over and over again versus a larger problem affecting a larger population in the building. So that's an example of what additional information might be. In step 6, the team will share ideas of what additional data they might want to collect. So perhaps, okay, well, we looked at baseline data in the whole school, but maybe we want to look at this same baseline data but broken into certain subpopulations, maybe socioeconomic demographics, maybe racial or ethnic demographics. Of course, all of that information being confidential, but it still might be important to break that broad stroke data into subgroups or with additional data to supplement what you already looked at. So the team can talk about what extra data they may want to pull and may want to look at during the next meeting. And then finally, you'll round out that initial analysis in the protocol by everyone saying 2 strengths that they see in the school based on the data and 2 areas that need improvement. And again, this will be scribed, and if a strength is repeated across team members, instead of writing it again, you can just put a tally mark, and again, it'll be a visual of how in agreement or not in agreement the team is with the strengths and areas of improvement that they have observed and come up with during their data analysis. And last but not least, we encourage all meetings to end with reflections. This is a really key piece in building relationships. We always start our meetings with a check-in to make sure that the team is okay, that they can exhale any personal or professional things that are on their minds, and we end with reflections where, again, team members are able to exhale some of the thoughts that they may have based on the meeting they just attended. So examples of reflection questions might be, what surprised you or stood out to you about what we looked at? What's one piece of data that's staying with you, that really resonated with you, that you're going to keep thinking about? What was it like to utilize this structured protocol for looking at our data? How did this process enrich your understanding, and what was hard about the process? Just acknowledge in these reflection questions that they'll be walking away with a certain impression, and that it's okay for them to reflect and exhale on that. And again, this is really key in building those relationships and those connections within your stakeholder team. Going to bring it to our guests for one last, pre-written question. How has Campaign Connect fostered relationships within various facets of your school community, and how has it affected how you think about and tell your school story?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think I've started one off yet, so I'll go ahead and kind of take the leap. Campaign Connect, in addition to the to the stakeholder team, what I've noticed over the years is that your stakeholder team will move and will transform. Staff members will transition into different roles or perhaps leave your building, whatever the case may be. But what we've been able to do is kind of increase the Campaign Connect kind of work and mantra and the fruit of that labor to our school community to build those relationships as well. So there are a lot of times in faculty meetings where if we're working on a very specific action from our action plan, we will have our teachers who are Campaign Connect folks get up and then pair up and create situations where they are communicating with one another and kind of advertising or telling the story of what the Campaign Connect stakeholder team is doing and why the action plan is the way the action plan is. So, I think that what it's really done is, and I'll kind of go back to a phrase I used before, which was it has created, instead of very delineated roles, it has mixed those roles where students and teachers and parents, we have our park ranger is on our team, so community members. It helps us all tell the full story, to kind of tell it to an extent that we want to. And in addition to that, it's made us want to advertise, publish, and market the work that we've done. So Campaign Connect has, and the work that we've done there has allowed us to show off, in a sense, where we'll tweet something out, or we send monthly parent bulletins now that explain the A's, B's, and C's of what we're doing as a stakeholder team, as a school when we're trying to improve climate and culture, et cetera. So it's really been, that's been one of the bigger impacts, is bringing a lot of people into the fold and then kind of creating the extensions, the subgroups, the groups of people who kind of hear our story and want to continue that work without it being underneath this official capacity of being on the stakeholder team.
Thank you, Kyle.
I mean, I'll jump in and say that I've had two different experiences because I've gone through the cycle at two different schools. And at the middle school, it definitely, I got to experience having the school have different connections to not only the building but the wider community. So part of what we discovered was that certain students were disengaged from school because they didn't feel connected to the people there or to the district, the community. So we started pulling in other aspects of the community, where we would have seniors come in on a bus a couple of times a month and work with students, and we would have students volunteer to collect items for a local food kitchen. We just found different ways to pull in the community to become part of our school and to make kids feel like, as a result, they're part of their own community. And that's something that we experienced at the middle school. At the elementary school, when I first came here, I really felt a need for Campaign Connect because of the culture and the climate of the building was noticeably different when I entered it. And there wasn't a connection yet between the administration and their points of view and I think, parents and community members. They had a very different perspective of how things were working and what the school and the community's goals were. And so I think Campaign Connect has fostered those relationships because parents are naturally now part of our stakeholder team. We looked for information from them from focus groups, and I think now they feel more like we are headed down a similar path. We want the same things, and they at least feel like they're part of it now.
That's great. Thanks, Laura.
As for us, our story has shifted. And the shift was a difficult but it was difficult, but it was an undeniable step that helped us to progress towards our priorities, which took a long time for us to develop, because those two were grounded in the truths that were revealed by the data that we gathered through both our staff and student surveys. So all of it was data grounded, but when the administration and the teachers and the parents and the students all seemed to land on common ground in areas of strength and concern, the work then gained support and momentum because all of the stakeholders agreed that we had arrived at something that was authentic.
Thank you. So in different ways, I've sort of heard the idea of authenticity reflected in all three of your responses, that there may be differences in what the parents are experiencing, what the community is experiencing, what the students are experiencing, what the administration is experiencing. And when you sit around the table and everyone has equal voice and everyone's looking at the exact same data and everyone's going through the same protocol, relationships begin to foster in such a way that people see the same strengths, they see the same challenges, and they're able to move forward and address issues in the school community with more of a unified buy-in. And that impacts how you think about and tell your school story. Maybe initially there were multiple school stories floating around, and now it's tied together in a more cohesive package because different and diverse stakeholders are sitting around the table. So thank you to our panelists. And I sort of just want to sum up a few key points that we've talked about in the webinar thus far. There's this idea that whole school climate and culture change occurs with a data-driven but relationship-based approach. And those two things can't be divorced from one another. The numbers show maybe the issues and the root causes that are surfacing in the building, but without those relationships and without that buy-in, no forward progress can be made in any sort of sustainable or unified way. And so we encourage schools, we encourage educators to keep their eyes on the prize, so to speak. So if culture is the way that we do things around here, quote unquote, then equitable dialogue, again, cultivated through the use of protocols, characterized by careful listening, can become a norm among stakeholders, among faculty and in classrooms, and that will create a ripple effect to change the culture to one that is more open, that communicates more freely, and that makes positive change. And finally, this database relationship-driven approach will create a continual feedback loop between school leadership and all layers of the school community. So there's no longer that disconnect of the administrator sees these things from a top-down approach, and they sort of implement these initiatives without fully consulting or understanding the perspectives of the students or the rest of the community. Instead, there's now a feedback loop where everyone's talking to one another. They're receiving feedback, they're giving input, and they're listening and speaking with the same amount of time, with the same voice. And as they receive this information, as they offer ideas for school improvement, it creates this glue that makes a strong climate and culture in the building. And once again, I just want to remind our participants to be on the lookout for an email that will offer both the New York Times article link and a Google Drive link that will bring you to the free meeting component for the data analysis protocol that we reviewed earlier in the webinar. Now I just want to allow everyone just a minute or two to maybe think of any questions that they may have, and you can chat it in the chat box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. And I can offer up those questions or comments to our guest panelists or even to myself, whoever you want to address, and then we'll have a few minutes of Q&A. So I will just give you guys a few minutes to think of any questions you may have before we move forward. Okay, so I think that it is safe to assume that we don't have any questions for now. So thank you to Kyle, Tora, and Carlos for their insight, for participating on the guest panel. And thank you to all of our participants for joining us in the webinar. Now, before you sign off, just a few quick things. If you want any additional information about CSS or Campaign Connect, feel free to contact myself, Christina Knight, or Catherine Enty, who is our New Jersey Executive Director. Our emails are on the slide right now. And also, after you sign off and the webinar is closed, you'll be receiving an email with a survey, and we would ask that all of our participants please fill it out. That is very important to us. So thank you again for your time, for your participation, and we hope that you found the past 45 minutes or so to be a valuable use of your time. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.